going to start with the first one, which is stay on message. So first, always remember that the presentation really matters. And I remember a long time ago, I read that presentation was just as important as content. And I've never forgotten that. It's a really good rule of thumb. But remember that it applies to every type of communication you use. I mean, take email, for example. So the good thing about email is that it's a permanent record of a conversation. The bad news about email is that it's a permanent record of a conversation. So I'm sure that some of you are probably emailing right now. We know that it's a very useful tool. We know it's a very useful tool, and it can be really useful when you're trying to disseminate a lot of information to a lot of people. The problem is that we have all sorts of ways to communicate these days. We don't necessarily do it well, and we also sometimes rely on the medium and don't focus on the message. So I'm going to read you part of this. I think it's very illustrative. Sorry I missed your call. I sent you a revised where I put into blue the estimate. In black where we ended up 15 hours was for a 4-day turnaround. It ended up at 23 days. Call me again. If you need me to redo, I understand about the guides you have to show it to, no problem. Production was extra 2 hours over. Right? I mean, there's no punctuation here. I mean, you don't even know where to start. You don't know where to stop. I mean, this is an extreme example of email, but I think you get my point. You have to have good presentation as well as good content. This has neither. So the other thing to remember is that clarity is so important, especially if you're writing with your thumbs on your emails, which we all do, but you still need to go back and check your punctuation and your spelling on your text messages and emails. Now, the people who originally wrote these statements didn't have the excuse of writing with their thumbs when they wrote these, because these are from a long time ago. I've saved them. They're from way, way back, and that is not their issue. What you're looking at are examples of descriptions that people wrote to their insurance companies when they were describing accidents that they'd been involved in. So they had to file a claim, and they wanted to describe what happened to their cars, right? I think these are so great, and I mean these are for real, and I didn't make these up. So I'll read these to you. An invisible car came out of nowhere, struck my car, and vanished. I was thrown from my car as it left the road. I was later found in a ditch by some stray cows. I pulled away from the side of the road, glanced at my mother-in-law, and headed over the embankment. So, I'm just using these to underscore how you need to communicate effectively. And you know how people say when you're sending an email that it doesn't have a tone? When you're typing an email, sometimes it's hard to understand what the recipient is going to see versus what you see and how you describe things. So it's really important to be clear. Unlike these examples, when you're giving information about you and your firms, you want to make it clear and you don't want to make it ambiguous. And we all know that there's so much verbal and digital noise out there that it needs to be compelling. And these are compelling, but in a different way, right? So there are, I love this. This is a store in Lower Manhattan. I walked by the store and I couldn't even believe it. I had to take a picture of it, right? We are probably the lowest price in the city. I mean, who thought about that, right? Who thought that would be a good sign, right? And there are a lot of ways you can attract new clients. Now, of course, you can use a sign like this one if you are, nervous about doing PR or if you're allergic to declarative statements. I don't recommend it. But before you do anything, you really need to know about your business strategy and your reason for being. In other words, you need to know what is your mission, what defines your firm, and why does it exist? And hopefully not because it's probably something or other. So even if you don't already have a mission statement, here are 4 essential questions that you want to ask and that you should be able to answer. And if you can't answer them, then you should be having that dialogue within your firms. So what do we do? How do we do it? For whom do we do it? And what value do we bring? So what do we do? How do we do it? For whom do we do it? And what value do we bring? This is a great thing to do with your firm leadership if you haven't done it. I'm sure that in some firms you may be able to do this very quickly, and this could be a very easy exercise. And this may be a little bit more challenging if you haven't really given thought to these questions, but it's very important to know the answers to these questions, especially for marketing. So in addition to your mission statement, you need to have some key messages in place, and I'll talk about a tagline next. So the key messages, think of the key messages like the DNA of your firm. You know, what makes the firm tick? These need to be written down and disseminated to the partners, and then anybody else who's involved in the marketing effort. Everybody needs to embrace these and be behind them. And you should use these messages in anything that you're writing about the firm, anytime you're talking about the firm, for social media. You should keep coming back to these key messages, and they should really underscore who you are and what clients need to know about you, and really why you're different from everybody else. They're really critical. The bottom line is you want everybody to be speaking consistently about the firm with a unified voice. So this needs to be reinforced in anything you write, anything you do, and anything you say. Because remember, you're always talking about your firms and your projects all the time. So it's not just what you write. You really need to internalize these messages. So think about, you know, how would you say it in 5 words? Your taglines are something that, you know, come more from the corporate world. They're sometimes, you know, maybe not as common in the AEC industry, but they can be really important too. I mean, they're just a short, memorable phrase that differentiates your firm. We all know Apple, think different, right? Or Nike, just do it. The art of performance. These are very powerful, impactful, short statements. So if you are thinking about a tagline, and you know, we like them, think about a couple things. One, you want them to be simple and clear. These are all short, sweet, to the point. You want them to speak directly to a benefit. And then last, you really want them to reflect your firm. I mean, the point about PR is that you really do you each come from a firm with a unique culture, and you shouldn't be scared of really showing that unique, you know, those unique aspects of your firm. So, if you're uncomfortable with the tagline, think about how you would describe your firm if you were limited to 140 characters in a tweet. And that's something that Sean in our office had said. You know, that might be a really interesting way of putting that into a kind of a 21st century context, right? Rather than a tagline. Something between the elevator pitch and a tagline. So think about that. I'm sure it's an interesting exercise. I'm not sure it's an easy one, but it could be very instructive.